Hello and welcome to this course. My name is Jeremy Kent. I will be your narrator as you make your way through the CME learning content. In this module, we cover player cues. Player cues show up in videos throughout the course. Having a basic understanding of player cues will provide you with the needed context in the other modules. So let's get started. When a player is concussed, they may have certain instinctual actions that can signal a sports-related concussion or an SRC. We call these signs player cues, cues into how they are feeling at the time of injury. In my experience, players are most forthright with their symptoms at the time of injury and immediately afterward. Once they're able to get their wits about them, they clam up. These player cues are sometimes the only window into how they're feeling. Cues are not always 100% specific, and so they don't automatically rule in an SRC, but they can be a clue that an SRC may have occurred. Recently, a consensus paper on the video evidence of SRCs was published. The article reached agreement through expert opinion pulled from several professional sports leagues: Australian Football League, Cricket Australia, Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NHL, National Rugby League, and World Rugby. I will integrate the ideas of this paper with other research to detail player cues through play highlights. This consensus paper that I just mentioned, called Player Cues, Video Signs of Concussion. I will use the words player cues and video signs of concussion interchangeably in this talk, but there is a difference. I prefer the term player cues because often the sideline medical staff does not have access to video, so viewing the signs on video is a moot point for them. The term player cues encompasses video signs along with sideline signs. The consensus paper agreed on 6 different video signs of concussion: lying motionless, motor incoordination, impact seizures, tonic posturing, floppy, and a blank or vacant look. We will go through each of these. Lying motionless is defined as lying without purposeful movement on the playing surface for greater than 2 seconds. The player doesn't appear to react or respond appropriately to the game situation, including the teammates, refs, or medical staff, and concern may be shown by other players. Lying motionless is typically one of the more obvious signs of an SRC. On rare occasions, it may be hard for the sideline team to spot a motionless player who then slowly staggers to their feet. In this case, the medical observer or sideline video review can be helpful. Knowledge of a player lying motionless can signify a brief loss of consciousness and can be an important piece of info to aid in diagnosing an SRC. Take a gander at this video of a motionless player. It's pretty obvious. The next video sign is motor incoordination. The player appears unsteady on their feet, including losing balance, staggering, stumbling, struggling to get up, or falling. It can occur in rising from the playing surface or in the motion of walking or running. This can be somewhat of a non-specific cue, as many times on the football field, players may show something that looks like motor incoordination, but it has nothing to do with an SRC. So differentiating an innocuous movement from an SRC can be difficult. The takeaway is to look for and hopefully not miss the more obvious motor incoordination signs. Okay, so video sign number 3 is impact seizures. Impact seizures are involuntary, clonic movements that comprise periods of asymmetric and irregular rhythmic jerking of axial or limb muscles. That's a lot of words. Impact seizures remain a point of discussion. The consensus statement used the term seizure, but there's disagreement on whether an SRC causes seizure-like activity. Typically, a seizure is defined by increased neural activity documented in an EEG, followed by typical symptoms: incontinence, tongue biting, a post-ictal period. An EEG is not an option for a concussed athlete on the field of play, so documentation of neural activity is impossible. But regardless of these limitations, some feel the characteristic movements of an SRC that looks like a seizure are basis enough on clinical symptoms to deem it a seizure. Other experts feel that the movements aren't seizures due to increased neural activity, but are instead due to a mechanical disturbance in the brainstem or cortical area from a concussive force. They term these movements concussion convulsions and group them with other paroxysmal movement disorders such as the tonic-clonic movements that can occur with vasovagal syncope. Regardless of the use of impact seizures or concussion convulsions, something is going on in the brain that isn't right, and these movements are a clear indication that an SRC has occurred. Moving on to tonic posturing. Tonic posturing is an involuntary sustained contraction of one or more limbs, typically the upper limbs, so that the limb is held stiff despite the influence of gravity or the position of the player. Tonic posturing may be observed while the athlete is on the playing surface or in the motion of falling, where the player may also demonstrate no protective action. Tonic posturing can be subtle, and reviewing the video could help identify this cue. Tonic posturing has also been called the fencing response because the concussed player moves their arms in such a way as to look like they're in the on guard position of fencing. I don't see it, but see if you agree in the following videos. The next slides show two videos of tonic posturing. The first video is seen on the far right. The second video is obvious and a good example of tonic movements. Here's the first video on tonic posturing. Here is that video one more time. This second video is a well-known event and pretty obvious.
Oregon State. They're running that crazy formation. This is best. Johnny leaps into the end zone. Touchdown, California. His job it all right, though. He landed on his back.
And he was up. He leaped to begin with, and then ended up landing on his.
So moving along, the cue of being floppy is just that. The player falls to the ground without extending arms, tucking head, or moving legs. Usually it's followed by the player lying motionless. Other players may congregate around looking concerned. This can be a devastating blow and potentially signify other injuries other than an SRC, such as a cervical spine injury. C-spine and airway should be the primary concerns for a floppy player. The final video signs for an SRC in the consensus statement is a blank or vacant look. This would be hard to spot in a player with a helmet unless the TV footage zooms in. If unhelmeted, you may be able to see this, such as when the player is on the sideline. There are other signals not detailed in the consensus statement that are specific to American football and are worth mentioning. These signals include a player shifting their helmet after a hit, shaking their head like they're trying to shake out the cobwebs, or holding their helmet. While some player cues may be clear evidence for an SRC, other cues such as shifting their helmet or shaking their head are more subtle and in isolation would not be concerning, but when added to the context of a hard hit, player position, and/or specific play, then that may pique your interest that an SRC occurred. Or the most obvious, if they are visibly altered, such as lining up on the wrong side of the field, going to the wrong sideline, or are very slow to make it back to the huddle. In summary, there are several player cues or video signs that a concussion may have occurred. These signs can be a definite indication such as lying motionless or tonic posturing. Others are less specific such as motor incoordination, shifting the helmet, or holding the head. Knowledge of player cues are another tool in the toolbox to help you identify in-game concussions. This concludes this module. Please click the back button on your internet browser to return to the training module main page. This concludes this module. Please click on the header bar to either proceed to the next module or return to the main page.